Days Gone is Sony's newest first-party title that dips its toes into the open-world zombie genre. Developed by Studio Ben, the same team that worked behind the Uncharted Vita games, this is the first main home console release from them in over a decade. With a lot on the line for the studio, let's see if their take on the post-apocalyptic world can stand out among the rest of the horde. Although most of its gameplay takes place in the present timeline, Days Gone dives into its narrative by showing you the juxtaposition between both before and after the apocalypse. Not to be confused with zombies, the apocalypse starts with an infection outbreak that turns humans into freakers. Basically this world's version of zombies, but not called zombies. You play as motorcyclist Deacon St. John, who is separated from his wife during the initial chaos of the outbreak. The narrative then switches between the present and the past timelines, showing you shades of Deacon's character, how the outbreak has affected him and his morals. The man he once was and the one he is now are constantly conflicting with one another. All of this is then represented by the number of days since he last saw his wife. At times it's astonishing to see how this man you're playing as once was, especially when he has these moments of rage that seem completely out of character based on the cutscenes you've seen so far. From one perspective, it's an interesting view on his character development in this messed up world, but from another, it can at times seem unrealistic. Overall though, Days Gone has an interesting plot that slowly reveals itself over time, albeit at a very slow pace. You can get through Days Gone in about 30 to 40 hours, but it feels like a game that you could have easily trimmed off some of that fat for a more well-paced story. Big moments happen at points where you don't really expect them, but then also have transition periods that sort of just drag on. It becomes easily apparent with the zombie apocalypse setting that has become redundant in video games. Taking place in a large open world, Days Gone is a survival game at heart. Sort of like The Last of Us, this is very much a game where you walk around and press square to collect everything around you. Bottles, flammables, rags, and anything that can be crafted. Unlike The Last of Us though, there is a bit of a pause with every pickup, and it can get annoying. I wish it was snappier. Nitpicks aside, these items are used for all kinds of survivalist tools like molotovs, health kits, and even repairs for your bike. Speaking of which, your bike is essentially your newborn kid because you will be taking care of it like if it was one. Driving across Oregon, you have to constantly refill it with gas tanks you find lying around. If you crash into something, you'll have to use scraps to repair any engine damage. Admittedly, riding the motorcycle didn't win me over right away. Days Gone makes the driving realistic by making its handling a bit cumbersome early on. It made moments where you got to upgrade your bike way more exciting, but those upgrades came at a pretty stretched out pace. Your bike isn't the only upgradable component in Days Gone. Deacon himself has his own skill tree that you can upgrade using skill points over time. These skills are broken up into different levels on separate skill trees. It's personally not my favorite execution of the mechanic. You can see which skills lead up to others, but the game requires you to upgrade the skills underneath first. Earning skill points isn't difficult, but really is more time consuming once you count all the skills you have to upgrade first before getting to the one you actually want. As Deacon, you're going through Bend, Oregon, completing different missions for the multiple camps. In this sense, the story is spread across multiple camps where you can decide where your resources are better allocated. Some camps might help you tune up your bike, while others may unlock new weapons. Missions for camps consist of completing bounties, taking out freakers' nests, getting food, and so on. In their first instances, these missions were fun, but then did become a bit repetitive over time with the 48-hour campaign. Of course, any game is repetitive by nature, I mean that's video games, but Days Gone doesn't do a lot to make its gameplay that enjoyable for long periods of time. Its standout feature being large zombie hordes is kept away from the player. It's not until about a quarter way into the campaign that you start to unlock the tools to take them on. That's a common trait with Days Gone. It holds back content towards the end, and that's really where it falls apart for me. I think it's better for a game to leave you wanting more than to overstay its welcome, dragging on for the sake of a longer but heavily padded campaign. Days Gone is sadly the latter. That's not to say that Days Gone's gameplay isn't worth playing. I enjoyed building up a badass motorcyclist in a world that was beautiful to drive through. Taking on hordes of zombies and stealthily taking out other rival camps is fun, but they come with blemishes that are hard to ignore. Days Gone is quite the mixed bag. It's not ugly, in fact it's a quite stunning looking game for one that was in development for about 4 years. The open world is designed around Bend, Oregon, exactly where Studio Ben is located. While it's not a one-to-one recreation of Oregon's wilderness, it's a lovely playground to drive through. With that said, it isn't that particularly remarkable in terms of a location. What does make it stand out is its dynamic weather system. It goes beyond just a day and night cycle. You'll get different types of weather elements that completely alter the terrain and thus the handling and controls of something like Deacon's bike. Cutscenes come off as these cinematic moments that are framed well with a beautiful looking depth of field over the characters in focus. It lives up to the moniker Sony first party games have had of being these movie-like experiences in video games. Overall, Days Gone is a beautiful game, but one with plenty of imperfections on the surface. Sony's first-party games are well known for the polish that goes into them, and oddly enough, Days Gone feels like it didn't hit that mark. While I wouldn't call these game-breaking bugs, they were instances that broke the immersion for me, ultimately psyching me out of any cool moments I was having. For instance, I had a moment early on in the game where I ran into my first horde. I'm not sure what happened, but the game made my bike invincible, and suddenly I had beaten my first horde in the first hour. In another instance, I had a tunnel completely spawn in while I was inside it. These are only the examples I happen to record. I've had other times where stealth kills didn't come up right, repeat dialogue happened, and so on. It doesn't really suffer from one specific issue, but a handful of different random issues. Speaking with other friends that were playing on both a base PS4 and a PS4 Pro, the issues seemed pretty randomly spread out throughout the player base. From my own personal experience, the PS4 Pro ran Days Gone at a mostly constant 30 frames per second at a checkerboard 4K resolution. The checkerboard upscaling here makes static images seem sharp, though a bit softer once in motion. As for the base PS4, resolution drops down to 1080p and has a more common frame rate dip that, while it doesn't completely ruin the game, is noticeable. When it comes to the music, Days Gone seems very self-aware of itself. A lot of the music derives from folk Americana with a bit of rock thrown in there. The collaboration between the two give off vibes of a dark and grim setting, and well, this is the apocalypse after all. The heavy guitar use invigorates the feeling that this could all be played by a retired biker gang member just sitting on their porch trying to survive this rundown world. It perfectly fits the theme of the world, the survival of the fittest. And the fittest are broken. I mean, how couldn't they be? This is a world that's completely stripped people of families, homes, and so on. Their grief, anger, and frustration are well performed to convey all these emotions. Deacon is performed by Sam Witwer, who was also Starkiller in the Force Unleashed series. I think he shines well in scenes where Deacon is a bit more understanding and level-minded with things, but he also has these moments where he can come off as a bit brash. Courtney Draper, who you might know as the voice of Elizabeth in Bioshock Infinite, does the voice for Sarah, who immediately won me over. Seeing the two perform scenes from before the world went to hell always left me wanting to see more of these two together. I enjoyed the audio work and performances throughout Days Gone when it worked. There were a few times where characters would talk over themselves, repeat lines, or just completely skip dialogue. Now, this doesn't seem to be a bad audio mixing issue, but rather a bug of things not activating properly or activating two scenarios at the same time. Regardless, when it happens, it completely cuts me out of the moment. Like its visuals, Days Gone's audio is remarkable when it isn't tripping over itself. Days Gone feels like it's constantly fighting itself. It's a beautiful looking game with a talented cast behind it, but is continuously sprouting out new bugs that break me out of the immersive open world. Its story and gameplay, though it's in a familiar setting, is able to stand out among the rest of the zombie genre. However, its slow-paced story only helps concentrate the feeling of repetition. It ultimately comes off as a game that overstayed its welcome, making me excited to finish this review and just play something else. This does have the Sony first-party quality to it, but not to the extent that we've come to expect. I'd recommend waiting on the sale for this one.